She humiliated me in front of my entire family on Thanksgiving, and it wasn't just embarrassing, it was devastating. But what I did next left everyone speechless. Stick with me while I share my story, and if it touches you, don't forget to support our channel by hitting that subscribe button, dropping a like, and sharing it with the people you care about. I had been looking forward to Thanksgiving, hoping it would be a peaceful day with family, but as soon as I arrived at Vanessa's parents' house in Connecticut, I could feel the tension. Vanessa Hughes, my cousin, was already there, dressed in designer clothes and wearing that smug smile that made me feel invisible. I have always been independent and hardworking, but in a family where privilege and wealth seemed to define worth, I often felt like I had to prove myself. From the moment dinner started, Vanessa couldn't resist taking jabs. She began with small comments about my apartment, my modest salary, and then moved on to my career. She said I must be lucky to even hold my position and laughed in front of everyone, making it clear she thought I didn't deserve any of it. I tried to smile and brush it off, but every word cut deeper than the last. My relatives laughed politely, some trying not to encourage her, but it felt like they were all on her side. As she went on, I felt my anger rising. It wasn't just the words, it was the way she made it personal, targeting everything I had worked for. She questioned my intelligence, implying that I wasn't capable of achieving anything meaningful without constant help. I sat there, trying to maintain my composure, my hands trembling slightly under the table. The humiliation was overwhelming, but I refused to cry. I had spent years learning to stand on my own, and I wasn't about to let her break me in front of everyone. I realized this was not just about one Thanksgiving dinner. Vanessa had a habit of doing this every time we met. She loved to flaunt her privileges and make me feel small, and for a moment, I wondered why I even tried to fit in with a family that never seemed to see me as anything more than the struggling cousin. But while my heart was heavy, a part of me began to plan. I knew I couldn't confront her directly in that moment, it would only make her laugh more. I needed to think carefully, to act in a way that would make her understand that humiliation has consequences. The anger simmered quietly, turning into something sharp and focused. I would find a way to take control, not through words at the dinner table, but through something far more meaningful. I finished my plate in silence, forcing myself to breathe and think clearly. The room was filled with laughter and chatter, but I felt a new sense of determination rising inside me. Vanessa may have humiliated me today, but I promised myself she wouldn't get away with it. Not this time. From that moment on, I knew things would change. The question was how, and when, I would make her pay for underestimating me. I had the patience, the mind, and the drive to turn this around, and I was ready to do it, quietly, cleverly, and in a way that would leave everyone stunned. Vanessa had always been the favorite in the family. Her parents adored her, praised her constantly, and seemed to overlook everything I did. No matter how hard I worked or what I achieved, it never felt like anyone noticed. Every birthday, every holiday, every family gathering, it was always Vanessa who got the attention. She got the gifts, the compliments, the praise, while I quietly stood on the sidelines, smiling and pretending it didn't bother me. Over the years, the small slights had added up. At my own birthday parties, relatives would forget to bring gifts or mention my achievements, while Vanessa's accomplishments were highlighted again and again. At holidays, she was always the one who got the best seats, the best food, and all the recognition. Even during casual family dinners, she found ways to make me feel small, comparing me to her or pointing out my mistakes in front of others. These moments had left me feeling invisible, like nothing I did mattered. I remember thinking many times that I was just the loser cousin, the one everyone tolerated but never truly celebrated. It was exhausting, feeling like I had to prove myself constantly and never being able to catch a break. I tried to stay positive, to focus on my work and my independence, but Vanessa's presence made it hard. She had this way of flaunting her success and reminding everyone, subtly or not, that she was better, smarter, and more accomplished. During this Thanksgiving, she didn't hold back. She openly bragged about her career, the promotions she had earned, and the luxurious vacations she had taken. Then she turned to me and said, in that condescending tone she loved, that I should really think about stepping up my game and that success doesn't just happen by hoping for it. Everyone laughed politely, but I felt the sting of humiliation all over again. It was clear she wanted everyone to see her as the winner, and me as the failure. As I sat there quietly, listening to her, a thought began to form in my mind. I realized that if I kept letting these moments slide, I would always be second best, always invisible, and always hurt. I didn't want to feel powerless anymore. I started thinking about ways to turn the tables, to make her realize that arrogance and cruelty have consequences. I didn't have to yell, argue, or make a scene. There was a smarter way to act, something that would make her regret ever humiliating me. For the first time in years, I felt a spark of determination. It wasn't just anger, it was a plan forming in my mind. Vanessa had underestimated me, and she had no idea what I was capable of. That moment, sitting there at the Thanksgiving table, I promised myself that I would do something she would never forget. The humiliation I felt would not define me. Instead, it would become the reason I would take action, and the results would speak louder than words ever could. The moment things truly crossed the line was when Vanessa brought up my college scholarship. She leaned back in her chair, smirking as she said I had barely deserved it and that the committee probably felt sorry for me. The words hit me harder than anything she had said before. It wasn't just a joke or a silly comment, she was attacking something I had worked incredibly hard for. Some of my cousins laughed, and a few adults cracked awkward smiles, unsure whether to stop her or join in. Either way, the damage was done. I felt the heat rush to my face, and suddenly the room felt too small, too loud, too bright. I tried to swallow the hurt, but the embarrassment was overwhelming. I pushed my chair back quietly, not wanting to cause a scene, and slipped away from the table while everyone was distracted by dessert and Vanessa's loud voice. I stepped into the empty hallway, taking a deep breath as I tried to calm down. I wasn't crying, but the sting behind my eyes reminded me of just how deeply her words had cut. I leaned against the wall and wondered why she always had to target me, why she couldn't let me have even a single moment without turning it into a joke at my expense. But as I stood there, something shifted in me. My humiliation slowly turned into a cold, sharp clarity. I remembered something important, something Vanessa had probably forgotten in her need to show off. A few months earlier, she had asked for my help organizing her younger brother Liam's college fund. I worked with numbers, budgets, and paperwork, and she trusted me to handle things she didn't want to deal with. She even bragged about how responsible and organized I was when she first handed it over, as if she was doing me a favor by letting me help. That memory clicked into place like a puzzle piece. I had access. I had knowledge. And most importantly, I had the ability to make changes, legal changes, that could affect her plans. I wasn't thinking of stealing or doing anything wrong. I wasn't going to break the law or hurt Liam. But I realized that I had the power to shift things in a way that would hit Vanessa exactly where she never expected, her pride, her control, and her perfect image. For the first time that night, I felt a sense of calm wash over me. I wiped my hands on my skirt and stood up straight. I didn't need to yell or argue with her at the table. I didn't need to defend myself in front of people who never cared to listen. I had a different kind of revenge in my hands, quiet, smart, and completely within my rights. As I walked back toward the dining room, I felt more determined than ever. She had humiliated me, but I wasn't going to let it end there. This time, I would decide how the story played out. On the drive home that night, I kept thinking about everything Vanessa had said and how easily everyone had laughed along. The more I replayed it, the more I realized that I had spent years letting her walk all over me. But this time, I had something she didn't expect. I had access to something important, something she trusted me with without ever thinking twice. I reminded myself of the skills I had worked hard to build. I was organized, careful, and good with numbers. Handling budgets and accounts came naturally to me, and I knew how to manage money far better than Vanessa ever did. She only cared about flashing her wealth, not understanding it. That carelessness was exactly what gave me the opening I needed. A few days after Thanksgiving, I reached out to Liam, her younger brother. Unlike Vanessa, he was gentle and polite. He always greeted me kindly and never made me feel small. When I asked him how he felt about his college fund and whether he understood how it was being handled, he admitted that he didn't know much. He trusted his parents, and by extension, he trusted me. He said he appreciated that I was helping him because he didn't want to burden his mom and dad with more questions. That innocence made me hesitate for a moment. I didn't want to hurt him. He didn't deserve that. My plan wasn't to sabotage his future. I simply needed to redirect things in a way that would throw Vanessa off balance. So, without alarming him, I asked if he wanted me to help organize it more carefully, maybe look at safer investments, or check if everything was set up correctly for when he finally applied to college. He agreed easily, grateful that someone was taking the time to explain things. With his approval, I had full access again. And this time, I wasn't just reviewing documents. I was preparing the groundwork for something much bigger. Still, I couldn't ignore the little voice in my head questioning whether I should be doing this. I wasn't the type to seek revenge, and a part of me wondered if I was going too far. But every time I thought about stopping, I remembered Vanessa laughing at me across the Thanksgiving table, acting like she was untouchable. The humiliation had burned deep, and no apology was ever coming from her. I wasn't planning anything illegal or harmful. I was simply rearranging things, adjusting timelines, shifting some accounts, and making sure everything followed strict rules Vanessa never bothered to learn. She would soon realize that she couldn't control everything the way she thought. That night, as I sat at my desk reviewing papers and typing updates, I whispered quietly to myself, almost like a promise, if you humiliate me, I'll make sure karma catches up. It wasn't loud, and it wasn't angry. It was calm, steady, and certain. For the first time in a long while, I felt like I had the upper hand. Once I had everything in front of me, I started making small, careful adjustments to Liam's college fund. Nothing illegal, nothing harmful, just strategic changes that followed every rule on paper. I moved some of the money into safer, slow-growing accounts. These accounts protected the money but also made access a little more complicated and delayed. It wasn't enough to hurt Liam at all. In fact, it actually made his fund more stable. But for someone like Vanessa, who loved to stay in control and see instant results, it would feel like the ground shifting under her feet. I spaced out the changes over several days so nothing looked sudden or suspicious. Each update was documented properly, with every step done by the book. I didn't want trouble. I just wanted Vanessa to feel the kind of pressure she had never felt before. She had humiliated me publicly, and now she would have to deal with something she couldn't laugh off. About a week later, the emails and phone calls started. First from her mother, asking why certain funds were locked or redirected. Then from Vanessa herself. She tried to sound calm, but I could hear the edge in her voice, that slight tremble she got whenever something didn't go her way. She asked why the account didn't look the same as before and why some transfers hadn't gone through the way she expected. I kept my tone gentle and professional. I explained that I had made adjustments to protect Liam's future, ensuring the money stayed safe from market risks. Technically, it was all true. But the real reason was watching her lose the control she valued so much. With each call, her frustration grew. I could practically picture her pacing around her room, red-faced, trying to figure out why she suddenly wasn't the one holding all the strings. She wasn't used to feeling powerless, especially not in financial matters that she believed she understood better than me. Whenever she complained, I acted like I was doing my best to help, speaking calmly, giving her explanations she barely understood. Inside, I felt a strange mix of satisfaction and guilt. A part of me enjoyed watching her struggle after all the times she made me feel inferior. Another part of me worried that maybe I was going too far. What if someone realized what I was doing? What if Liam got dragged into it? But every time that doubt crept in, I reminded myself that I wasn't harming anyone. The money was safe, even safer than before. I wasn't stealing, lying, or breaking rules. I was simply rearranging things in a way that made sense, just not to her. Still, the tension inside me grew as the days passed. I could see the panic in Vanessa's eyes each time she approached me with more questions, and I had to bite my tongue to keep from smiling. I stayed patient, giving her half-answers while watching her confidence crumble. Even with the guilt lingering in the back of my mind, I couldn't deny it. For the first time ever, I felt like the power had shifted. And it felt almost too good. A few days later, Vanessa finally sat down to check Liam's college fund herself. She had been avoiding it, thinking I was just helping and everything would be fine. But as soon as she opened the accounts, her face went pale. Numbers didn't match what she remembered. Transfers she expected hadn't gone through, and some investments were locked in ways she didn't understand. Panic set in, and her usual confidence vanished. She immediately called me, her voice sharp and trembling. "Emily, what did you do?" she demanded. "Why isn't anything accessible? Did you mismanage this? Or, are you embezzling money?" I stayed calm, letting her storm for a moment. Every accusation she threw at me only proved how rattled she was. She had never expected that I could handle things better than she could, or that I could act in a way that made her feel powerless. Vanessa didn't stop there. She rushed to her parents, yelling about how I had supposedly messed up Liam's fund. At first, they believed her. They had always seen her as the capable one, the favorite, while I was the quiet cousin in the background. Family members took her side immediately, asking me to explain myself. The weight of everyone staring at me, expecting an apology, made my stomach tighten. But I didn't panic. I took a deep breath and kept my voice steady. Calmly, I explained that all adjustments were legal, safe, and intended to protect Liam's future. I reminded everyone that Vanessa had handed the responsibility over to me, trusting my judgment, and that every decision was carefully documented. Then I subtly added, almost casually, "I've just been trying to help Liam, since, he's always been caught in the middle of family dramas. I just hope next time we all think about how our words and actions affect him." Everyone paused for a moment, sensing the underlying meaning. My comment wasn't loud or aggressive, but it reminded the family of Vanessa's history of cruelty, the teasing, the public humiliation, the way she always made me feel small. Vanessa's face flushed red. She opened her mouth to argue, but I held her gaze calmly, letting her frustration build without replying. The room felt tense, the kind of tension that comes when someone who always had control suddenly realizes they don't. In that silence, I felt a strange satisfaction. All the humiliation, all the mocking laughs over the years, had led to this moment. My careful planning, my patience, and my quiet strategy were finally paying off. Vanessa, who had always thought she was untouchable, was now panicking while I remained composed. I could see it clearly, she had underestimated me, and her anger only made my victory quieter but sharper. At that moment, I realized how effective patience and strategy could be, and how satisfying it was to watch someone who once held all the power scramble to understand what had happened. My revenge, quiet and calculated, was finally unfolding exactly as I had planned. I waited until Vanessa had calmed down slightly before I decided to speak to her privately. I found her alone in the living room, pacing and muttering under her breath, her face red with frustration. I took a deep breath, keeping my voice steady, and said, "Vanessa, we need to talk." She looked up, surprised and annoyed, but didn't leave. I sat down across from her and met her gaze calmly. I wasn't yelling, and I wasn't pleading. I wanted her to understand clearly, without distractions. "I want you to know exactly what happened," I began. "I didn't mismanage anything. Every move I made with Liam's college fund was intentional, careful, and legal. I've managed it better than you ever could have." I said it plainly, letting the words sink in. Her eyes widened, and for a moment, I could see confusion battling with anger. She opened her mouth, probably to argue, but I continued before she could interrupt. "You've always acted like you were better than me," I said softly, yet with firm conviction. "You humiliated me in front of everyone at Thanksgiving. You laughed at my hard work, my scholarship, and my accomplishments. And now," I paused, letting the moment hang between us, "you've lost control of something you thought was completely yours." She stared at me, speechless. I could see the shock, the disbelief, and the frustration bubbling just under the surface. She had never expected me to speak this way, to confront her calmly while exposing the arrogance she had carried for so long. Her usual confidence, the way she dominated every conversation, had vanished. I continued, keeping my tone even. I didn't do this out of anger alone, Vanessa. I did this because you need to understand that humiliation has consequences. Mocking someone, making them feel small, thinking they'll always let you walk over them, it doesn't go unpunished forever. Actions have consequences, even if they take time to show up. For a few long seconds, she didn't respond. Her mouth opened and closed like she was trying to find words, but none came out. I could feel the tension radiating from her, the kind that comes when someone realizes they've miscalculated and lost control. I stayed seated, calm, watching her process everything, knowing that for once, she couldn't dominate the situation. Finally, she muttered something about not believing I did all this, but I didn't interrupt. The truth was clear, and it was enough. The message had been delivered. Her arrogance, her cruelty, and her habit of humiliating others had led her to this moment. As I left the room, I felt a strange mix of satisfaction and relief. I hadn't shouted, I hadn't made a scene. But Vanessa had felt the weight of her actions, and for the first time, she was seeing the consequences of treating someone else as beneath her. Humiliation, I realized, was never one-sided. It could turn around in ways no one expected. After my private talk with Vanessa, I realized it was time for the family to understand the full story. I gathered everyone in the living room, making sure the atmosphere stayed calm. I began to speak, my voice steady but carrying the weight of everything I had endured over the years. I told them about the countless times Vanessa had mocked me, small comments at birthday parties, teasing at family dinners, and the constant comparisons that made me feel invisible. I described how she had publicly humiliated me at Thanksgiving, belittling my scholarship and my achievements in front of everyone. At first, there were quiet gasps. Some family members exchanged awkward glances, unsure how to react. I didn't raise my voice or accuse anyone, I just spoke plainly, sharing the truth as I had experienced it. I could see a shift in their expressions. A few relatives, who had laughed along with Vanessa that night, suddenly looked guilty. They began to question why they had stayed silent, why they had allowed her cruelty to go unchecked for so long. Vanessa shifted uncomfortably, her usual confident demeanor faltering as I continued. I explained that for years I had suffered in silence, always trying to keep the peace, always trying to be polite, and always being the loser cousin in the family's eyes. I told them that the humiliation wasn't just one moment, it was the result of years of her arrogance and relentless need to prove she was better than everyone else. As I spoke, I felt a new sense of strength rising within me. This wasn't just about revenge anymore, it was about standing up for myself and reclaiming my voice. I could see the family absorbing my words, realizing for the first time that Vanessa's behavior had been cruel and unfair. Some shook their heads slowly, clearly feeling ashamed for having laughed or looked away. Others nodded quietly, as if acknowledging that they had never fully seen what I had been through. Vanessa remained silent, her face a mixture of shock and embarrassment. The power she had always held over the family had vanished. For the first time, she understood that her arrogance and need to belittle others had consequences. The very people she had relied on for support were now seeing her for who she truly was, and she had no one to blame but herself. By the end of my speech, the mood in the room had shifted completely. I wasn't just the cousin who had been humiliated, I was someone who had quietly taken control, stood up for herself, and revealed the truth without attacking anyone unfairly. I felt an emotional satisfaction I hadn't expected, a mix of relief, pride, and validation. Vanessa's silence spoke volumes. She realized her cruelty had backfired, that her arrogance had blinded her, and that her attempts to control everyone around her had failed. In that moment, I knew I had finally reclaimed my dignity, and the family now saw me not as the overlooked cousin, but as someone strong, clever, and deserving of respect. Sitting alone in my room that night, I finally let myself think about everything that had happened. The events of the past few weeks replayed in my mind: the humiliation at Thanksgiving, the planning, the adjustments to Liam's college fund, and the eventual confrontation with Vanessa. I felt a strange mix of emotions: satisfaction, relief, and a quiet pride. Revenge had been satisfying, but more than that, it had taught me important lessons about patience, strategy, and understanding my own worth. I realized that I didn't have to act impulsively or lash out in anger to make a point. Carefully thinking things through, waiting for the right moment, and making deliberate choices had been far more effective. I had learned that strength isn't always about loud declarations or dramatic gestures; it can also be quiet, calculated, and smart. My actions had shown me that I could take control of situations where I had previously felt powerless. Most importantly, I understood my own value. For too long, I had let Vanessa and others define how I saw myself. I had believed, even subconsciously, that being overlooked or mocked meant I was less capable. But this experience reminded me that my worth isn't determined by anyone else's opinion. It is built by my effort, my intelligence, and my ability to stand up for myself when it matters most. I thought back to a few key moments and realized just how much they mattered. The careful planning, the calm execution, the private confrontation, it all added up to more than just revenge. I didn't just hit back at Vanessa, I reclaimed my dignity. That thought brought a quiet smile to my face. The humiliation I had endured wasn't wasted; it had sparked a change in me that no one could take away. I also understood something else: humiliation can be painful, but it can also ignite growth and courage. Sometimes the moments that hurt the most push us to find strength we didn't know we had. My story wasn't about teaching Vanessa a lesson through cruelty; it was about proving to myself that I could act with intelligence and integrity, even when faced with unfair treatment. That was the true victory. Looking back, I felt empowered, not bitter. I hope that anyone listening to my story, anyone who had ever been underestimated, mocked, or made to feel small, could see that it's possible to rise above. Change doesn't have to come from anger alone; it can come from clarity, strategy, and self-belief. In the quiet of my room, I repeated it to myself one last time: sometimes humiliation is the spark that ignites change. I felt a deep sense of peace knowing that I had faced adversity, reclaimed my self-respect, and grown stronger in the process. This experience would stay with me forever, not as a reminder of pain, but as proof that I am capable, resourceful, and worthy of respect. A few days after everything had settled, I sat down with Liam to help him review his college fund one last time. I wanted him to feel confident and secure about his future, and I made sure he understood every detail. We went through each account carefully, checking investments, timelines, and access rules. Liam was grateful, smiling and thanking me for taking the time to explain things. Seeing him relaxed and confident made me feel proud. I knew that everything I had done was safe, legal, and genuinely in his best interest. Vanessa, of course, was still fuming, but she had no choice but to apologize. She approached me quietly, her face red, muttering a grudging "I'm sorry" under her breath. I accepted it calmly, not because I had forgiven her completely, but because I had already achieved what mattered most: respect, dignity, and control over my own life. I didn't need her full apology to feel validated; her words were enough to show that she finally understood the consequences of her actions. That Thanksgiving dinner, when I returned, felt completely different from the one before. The family looked at me with new eyes. They no longer saw me as the quiet cousin who could be pushed around. They saw someone capable, clever, and strong enough to stand up for herself while still protecting those who mattered. For the first time in years, I felt fully respected in that family circle. Pride and confidence filled me as I realized I had turned humiliation into strength. I left the dinner that evening with my head held high, a sense of calm accomplishment settling over me. The lessons I had learned went far beyond revenge. I had discovered patience, strategy, and the value of standing up for myself. Vanessa's arrogance and cruelty had backfired, but I hadn't let bitterness control me. Instead, I had acted with intelligence and integrity, and that made the victory truly meaningful. Before leaving, I turned to the camera, or, in my mind, to anyone listening, and thought about the story I had just lived. Have you ever been humiliated like I was? I would ask. Would you have taken revenge or walked away? Comment below, I want to hear your story. It wasn't just a question for engagement, it was a way to connect, to show others that they weren't alone in feeling overlooked, mocked, or underestimated. Walking out into the crisp evening air, I felt lighter than I had in years. I had reclaimed my self-worth, proved my capabilities, and protected someone I cared about. The Thanksgiving that had started with embarrassment and anger had ended with respect, pride, and a quiet sense of triumph. I knew that this was a turning point, not just in how the family saw me, but in how I saw myself. I had faced humiliation, turned it into a lesson, and emerged stronger, wiser, and ready for whatever came next.